Welcome back, everybody, to the Victory World Cup circuit, sponsored by Elgato. I'm David Partington, and I'm joined by Ben Kiraku. How you doing, sir?
Very good, very good. And just came out the back of a really quite quick but decisive match, and one that I just want to spend some time talking about because I'm still not quite over the Pokemon that we saw. Of course, it was a Lunala centric team versus a Zacian team, and when you face those two Pokemon against each other, it's normally like a little bit of trading, a little bit of maybe Trick Room goes up, maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's some supporting cast that can do some work. But in the last match, Jellicent for Offhorn just dominated completely. Safety goggles on the Jellicent, getting Trick Room set up for Offhorn coming in game one and just like water spout gyrable, water spout gyrable. We even got to the end of Gyrable's PP. So like how long that game was and how many times it was used almost completely for free. Unfortunately, not the matchup for Andy, who was running that Zacian, but yeah, just great to see those sort of matches. But of course, moving forward, we've got another match, and this match is between Spain and Puerto Rico.
Yes, we do. We've got Víctor Medina and Sergio Mojica. Spain versus Puerto Rico. So these two teams are very much the polar opposites of each other at the moment in their group stages.
Okay, on a screen.
Here they are in the week 3 here. So we've already had 2 matches. Spain are already 2-0 up versus Puerto Rico here. And we've seen there's a lot of Zacian down there at the moment with the odd Groudon kind of tucked in there too. So Spain are already looking in a very strong position. And Spain having won like both their previous weeks as well, are now actually guaranteed to go into the next phase, whereas Puerto Rico are still yet to take a win. So it's still looking very rough for them at the moment. So they are definitely going to need to get this win to even have a chance to kind of get through, because the other two teams have still 1 win, 1 loss as well. So Kenneth de Jesus and Kenneth himself and Tirado had a very strong fight, it seems, with their Zacians, both still getting that 1 win versus, even though they did end up losing the set. So it could be a very close set coming up for this one too, especially because Sergio Mojica is 2-2, which is a very strong record, but he is going up against Victor, who is 3-0.
3-0 indeed, and definitely nothing to shake a stick at. Of course, yeah, well-fought wins there for the Spanish players, but just managing to edge it out. And I think that's probably a little bit of the story of Puerto Rico's time in the tournament, just not quite managing to edge out those close matches. And unfortunately for them, by looking at the standings, unlikely, very, very unlikely, in fact, to qualify for the next stages of the tournament. But you still want to go out with a bang, and you want to be putting your stamp on the tournament as much as you can. As much as already getting to the group stages is on this sort of tournament, you definitely want to be trying to if you can knock a peg off of the the team that ends up top in the group, you're going to be feeling pretty good about that. A little bit of an uphill battle here, got to win the next 5 at the very least. So we'll see if we can start that trend, that upward spiral in this match between these two players. And without further ado, let's introduce these 2 players and what they're running, starting with Victor Medina from Spain, running that Calyrex Shadow Rider.
Yes, he is. With the Entei, the Rillaboom, the Urshifu Rapid Strike, Nihilego, and that Whimsicott. And he's got a couple of accolades up his sleeve as well. In 2018, top 4 in the World Championships in the senior division. And in 2017, top 4 in the Europe Internationals as well, which are some very nice accomplishments there. So as well as getting those, he's also obviously doing very well for himself in 2021 as well. And yet another Calyrex Shadow Rider that we've seen here too. Very similar to the matchup that we saw in our game 1 of our stream today with that Entei and the Rillaboom and the Whimsicott as well. So able to provide a lot of speed control, especially in that Whimsicott, and a lot of say, Trick Room that we could have here. Maybe a Roar on the Entei, maybe Fake Out on the Rillaboom most likely. And there's a few taunts that could definitely be going around here. Nihilego, usually only 1 set at the moment, which is like the Power Herb. But Sash Trick Room does occasionally crop up there, which could be an excellent surprise anti-Trick Room that could come out from here.
Definitely, and Victor's wanting to put on as much pressure, almost certainly, onto Sergio's team as he can. The Calyrex Shadow Rider being something so aggressive, something that you have to be really, really careful in the way that you build and you compose your teams, just to make sure that you don't automatically lose to it if it launches out all of those Astral Barrages. Gets that Grim Day boost and then just steamrolls through your team. But of course, we also have Sergio on his side of the field, and we're going to see what he's going to be running. Unfortunately, no accomplishments for Sergio to show at the moment, as aside from those 2 wins that he's already got for his team in the tournament previously. But he's going to be rocking that Zacian, Landorus, Rillaboom, Regieleki, Urshifu, potentially single strike here, and Incineroar. So pretty standard looking team, but could be some things that Victor has to worry about. That Zacian, if it gets going, the constant pressure of fake out, and of course that Intimidate, if that as well will be putting on a fair amount of pressure. Of course, if that Urshifu is single strike as well, does carry that dark typing, it's going to be doing pretty well into Victor's team, depending on whether that Whimsicott is carrying Moonblast. So, may not be a really concrete way of stopping this single strike Urshifu, at least not quickly, and that could give Sergio the matchup that he needs to pull this win out for Puerto Rico.
Certainly is, Ben, and it's definitely on Victor to be thinking about how he's built this team. And I think if there's anything that you have in mind when you're building a team like this, it's those Pokemon that Sergio is going to be bringing here. It's that Zacian, that really nice common core of the Rillaboom, the Landorus. You got the Firewater Grass if you do. If it is that single strike, though, that does kind of change things up quite a bit for Sergio here. If he is expecting that Calyrex Shadow, because that's going to be pretty big, especially if there's maybe the Sucker Punch. There's no Serena to block that, no Tapu Lele. So anyway, let's get into this match here versus these 2 players. We've got Spain versus Puerto Rico, and we're going to see some interesting leads, probably some more like standard ones, I could imagine. Say like the Calyrex Shadow always gets led at the moment, but as soon as you've got a Whimsicott on the team, that's often one that you definitely want to be picking as well, because you're able to shut down opposing speed control and get your own up at the same time. So let's see what people go for, but it's a very fast lead coming out from the Zacian end.
Yeah, and one of the ways that you can get some speed control going on your side of the field is with that Regieleki coming out for Sergio, going to be trying to go for Electro Webs and such. And, if this Whimsicott does go for the Tailwind, likely is going to outspeed with the Entei, but if that Regieleki's holding a Focus Sash, then it's going to be able to get an Electro Web off, and once it's got one Electro Web off, it's likely to be able to get a second one off, and that'll mean that the Tailwind is moot, at least for the Pokemon on the field, and that Victor has a lot to worry about going forward.
He does, and so we see the Zacian switch out, pretty scared of the Fire type on Victor's end, so Sergio switches in the Incineroar, the all-reliable switch in that pretty much loves to switch into anything at the moment. But no Intimidate onto the Entei thanks to that in focus. Tailwind does go up from Victor, as we do see the Sacred Fire does hit into the Regieleki, doing a huge amount of damage. And if there is a burn there, that might KO, but there is none. Electro Web still comes out instead, potentially breaking a Focus Sash on the Whimsicott, hits both targets and gets a crucial speed drop here. But as you say, Ben, there could be a case for this Regieleki getting another one off. However, I wonder if this Whimsicott is still pretty fast at the moment, so it may still be able to outspeed in this Tailwind and pick off that Regieleki if it does have an attacking move here. But Incineroar has just come in, and it's ready to fake out, stall further turns of Tailwind, and maybe get Regieleki off with more attacks here. So I like the play from both players here, but I think especially if Regieleki can survive this turn with maybe a fake out or protect, Sergio is in a decent position because he can parting shot, he's always going last and gets something in really safely.
He does indeed, as Whimsicott does want to be safe this turn. Goes for the switch out, bringing in that Urshifu is that Rapid Strike version. Regieleki just going for the protect, not wanting to take any damage, not wanting to risk maybe an extreme speed coming out from the Entei, which looks like it could have been the case there. Unfortunately, don't read Spanish, so can't confirm that for sure. Flare Blitz goes into the incoming Urshifu and doesn't take too much damage, and of course Incineroar takes a little bit of recoil for its trouble.
It does, so a fairly safe play on Sergio's end. Victor, however, does kind of read into that, and it gets his Urshifu into a pretty nice position, especially if there's maybe an extreme speed on this Entei. Zacian, however, is the switch in for this Incineroar and gets the all-important attack boosts. But we still don't know what items are on either side, but Sacred Fire luckily doesn't go into the Zacian for Sergio's end, and Regieleki goes down.
Does indeed, and of course there is that Surging Strikes coming into the Zacian, so 1 KO, 1 large amount of damage. You see how much damage each hit with that Surging Strikes does. Definitely putting that Zacian in range of another Surging Strikes later, and if this Entei is carrying the Choice Scarf, which could be what it's gone for, especially since it outsped that Regieleki with a stage of decreased speed, but also the Tailwind in play, you'd kind of assume that was the case. And now we're getting sort of through the Tailwind. We've not got too many turns left, but it is that Urshifu single strike that comes in, and we'll see if that's enough for Sergio.
It is. I mean, it's kind of the position that you really want your Urshifu Rapid Strike in right at the moment. Because you'd be able to threaten a lot of damage into the Entei, resist the Surging Strikes on the opposing end. But we do have the single strike here, which I still think is going to be quite crucial in this matchup too. So I don't blame him for bringing it. And especially if he's able to get a Wicked Blow off, and we don't even know what item that is. If it's maybe a Choice Band or something, or even if this Entei isn't that bulky, it could actually even go down here. But Sergio still has Tailwind turns to stall out here.
Does indeed, and Sacred Fire going into that Urshifu, doing a fair amount of damage, but not picking up the burn, and that could be crucial with what plays out in the following turn. But Zacian not able to protect itself from those Surging Strikes, not wanting to switch in the Incineroar to take it either, especially when it always lands a critical hit and probably knocked out the Incineroar on the switch in. So Zacian goes down there, Urshifu goes for the Wicked Blow onto the Entei. Doesn't pick up the knockout though, so pretty good training there on the Entei, and managing to survive that turn will leave him in a great position to just go for another attack into that Urshifu, irrespective of the fake out coming out from this Incineroar.
It does. So Sergio is able to bring in his Incineroar, as many people do, and have many hundreds of times over our years playing Pokemon. So he's able to maybe fake out this Urshifu, but as you say, the Urshifu, the Entei here is still able to hit through a lot of damage. But crucially, this Urshifu has some very nice EVs. It's able to take that Sacred Fire fairly well. I was interested to see how much bulk maybe is on this Entei of Victor's, because its HP looked quite high, but not doing a huge amount of damage there. But there comes the fake out from Incineroar to the early target it can. Sacred Fire comes out to the Urshifu. Is it a KO though?
It is not a KO, not picking up that just yet. Wicked Blow coming into the Urshifu from Urshifu on Sergio's side of the field, and no burn from 2 Sacred Fires either, worth pointing out there. But now we're in a place where, it's going to be just Victor having the opportunity to go for 2 attacks here and really try to close out this match. Not really a lot that Sergio can do now, not being able to switch, and Sergio knows that, goes for the forfeit there. Not wanting to give any more information away than he needs to, maybe trying to preserve the item choice on that Incineroar. So it is going to be game 1 to Victor.
It certainly is. So, and it's an interesting game there as well, because we don't think we actually saw the Calyrex Shadow Rider at all. Just really shows how oppressive this Entei is in the format at the moment, especially when it's Choice Scarf, because you, even without the Tailwind, you are exerting so much offensive pressure straight off. Because especially as you haven't even picked your moves if you are that Choice Scarf. So, and even with that Sacred Fire, if most of your damage output is coming from physical attackers, it doesn't matter whether you're not weak to it or not. It's still a very risky move to be hitting into. And even though it didn't get the burn both times as that Urshifu, thanks to that really crucial bulk, Entei was able to live a little bit longer and be able to still stack up that offensive pressure versus the rest of Sergio's team.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what makes this matchup so difficult for Sergio, because he's got so many Pokemon that can do so well, but the Zacian is immediately threatened by the Entei on Victor's side of the team. And without Tailwind, without Electro Web on the field, the Entei is still faster, and that's really difficult to manage when you're a Zacian player, especially when you don't have access to Rapid Strike Urshifu, because in this particular matchup, the single strike Urshifu is great against the Calyrex, but you do leave yourself a little bit open to the Entei, because you don't have a really solid way to pick it up very quickly, other than with that Landorus. But Landorus is under threat from Urshifu, that Rapid Strike Urshifu, and it all goes around in a little bit of cycle as well, because Landorus doesn't like to play against Calyrex. So you've got to balance all of those things when you're coming to this match, and I think it's a really just tough matchup for Sergio with the way that Victor's playing it.
Yes, but let's get into game 2 this time. So let's see if Sergio kind of maybe switch things up a little bit, because I think it'd be great to see potentially a Landorus come in here, because if that is the case, then he does actually have another answer for this Entei. And maybe the Rillaboom as well, because it's a great opportunity, great Pokemon to be able to hit. Despite Tailwind, you can hit those priority Grassy Glides, and especially into Calyrex too. But here it is. We have the Landorus and that Rillaboom.
Yeah, Landorus and Rillaboom coming onto the field, burst off, but switch up from both players here. We have the Landorus and Rillaboom appearing for Sergio, which is different from his lead in game 1. Of course, Whimsicott was on the field before, but Calyrex finally showing its face in this matchup and putting on really quite a lot of offensive pressure here.
Yeah, it really is. And Victor has absolutely everything he needs to get a lot of damage on the board as well. I believe that could be a helping hand right there as well. So if there's no Focus Sash maybe on this Landorus, which is not very common, it could be going instantly down this turn, because Calyrex is not going to get faked out, that's for sure. But a lot of Rillaboom are able to two-shot Calyrex with their Grassy Glides, so let's see maybe if that's enough here.
Yeah, Helping Hand is coming out from the Whimsicott, successfully going first, even though Fake Out was going into it from the Rillaboom. And there it is. The Astral Barrage probably going to be able to pick up the knockout on the Landorus, but will it be able to pick up the Rillaboom? Yes, it does. Oh my god, that's 2 KOs there for Victor. Turn 1, pretty much for free. That's 2 Grim Neigh boosts coming out onto the Calyrex. And if there was ever a drawing board to go back to, Sergio's got to go back there right now.
I think so. I'm surprised that Rillaboom has gone down actually to that attack, because maybe it's not Assault Vest, which is probably the very, very common item on Rillaboom for a good reason too, and maybe that was showing there as well. Unless there's maybe an item on this Calyrex that we haven't expected, maybe even a Choice Specs, because then that could explain the damage output that be coming from this. I haven't seen the item myself, but yeah, and Tailwind isn't even up yet either, so Victor is able to get that up immediately whenever he wants and have as much power as he likes to go straight out for it, and he has all the speed control. So Tailwind goes up, and what's his Calyrex going to do?
Yeah, well, looking like the Calyrex is going to go straight for another attack. So no Sucker Punch coming out from the Urshifu, no Protect coming out from the Zacian. Just a clean knockout into that Zacian after Tailwind goes up, and wow. It's going to just be Calyrex versus, or Calyrex team in full versus Urshifu. Calyrex is going to go down to the Wicked Blow this turn. Kind of what we expect. Could have been a Sucker Punch, but certainly if Sergio is locked into Sucker Punch, that's not a great place to be going forward. So kind of understand if Sergio was going to be locked into Sucker Punch for the rest of the game, if that was his item choice on the Urshifu. Then maybe he didn't want to go for it, and Victor just goes like, hey, I'm really ahead, I've got this really powerful Pokemon. Could have been Choice Specs on it as well, looking at the potential move choices that the Calyrex had to go for, and he's sort of like, well, I might as well just attack, I'll get Tailwind up, and then I can bring in my other 2 Pokemon and clean up the game from there.
Yeah, and as we see, this Urshifu Single Strike on Circuit Set and actually isn't choice locked either. So as we saw the last ditch Sucker Punches, it does go down to that Moonblast. So just in 3 turns, our game 2 is over, and the set does go to Víctor Medina of Spain, putting them 3-0 up versus Puerto Rico, which is very impressive and very much in line with how they've been doing versus everybody else.
Yeah, and it's there's almost not a lot to say about that game, right? I mean, you just saw the helping hand, Astral Barrage go out, and it's like if you don't have Pokemon strong enough to be able to take that attack, which, to be fair, most players aren't, especially if it was a choice specs on the Calyrex as well. That could explain why it knocked out the Rillaboom on Sergio's side of the field. So like, once you get to that stage, and once you've knocked out two Pokemon, you've stopped pivoting, especially for a team composition like Zacian. It's just so hard to come back anyway, especially when you've got to do that in front of a Calyrex that's potentially specs and also got two boosts already, and that's just, it's so oppressive to be able to play against. So not sure how much more Victor could have done against that particular lead in that particular game. And of course, game one was fairly convincing as well for Victor, just being able to go for his strategy, really use that Entei very well, and come in game two and just switch it up and just take maximum advantage of what Sergio had brought to the match.
He certainly did, and that's another player now, Victor Medina, up 4-0 in this tournament too. So even for Spain as well, he's doing amazingly well. So that is our game 3 of our session, but we do have 5 games total for you all this to Friday of fun and just a lot of offense, it seems. So coming up next, we do have Switzerland versus Vietnam, Demo Lokomik versus Hang Trong. Apologies if there's been any mispronunciations there, but let's take a short break and we will be right back with you with this upcoming match.